So live sports production is evolving rapidly. What do you see as the biggest trends shaping the industry right now?
I think there's probably two or three. The transition to IP has been talked about for many years, but is still ongoing. There's still a lot of people moving from SDI to IP. But not only the transition to IP, I think with IP, you get the enablement of software-defined production. And that's another key trend for us, is that move from hardware to software, or not necessarily the move, but the augmentation of hardware with software. So we really see this kind of marriage between the two. You know, EVS is traditionally known as a very hardware-driven company, but the need to have software for scalability, burstability, all that kind of thing. The need to have software that you can deploy on, off-the-shelf deployment in data centers, in the edge, in the cloud. So those two are quite key. I would say IP and everything that comes with software around it. And I would say the key driver to all of that is change. You know, everyone is changing, and there's just a constant change. The only constant is change at the moment. So that's quite a key driver for vendors, for broadcasters, for everyone in the industry. It's just that everything is changing all the time. So there's a couple of real key trends there that are really influencing, you know, what we do, what we deliver, the products that we make, and the solutions that we bring to market.
And one of those changes is AI. How is EVS integrating AI into your solutions, and can you share an example of how it's improving live sports production?
Yeah, I think there's a good example would be like Zebra, for example, our VAR product. Zebra uses AI to do things like detect the pitch, detect the dimensions of the pitch, to align things. It uses AI in the virtual offside line or the semi-automated offside line technologies. So those are things where it's more about things like reducing setup time, enabling the human to have to do less work in terms of configuration or something like that. And it's about speed more than anything. It's about bringing things faster for the human. I mean, traditionally, pitch detection is something you sort of did with a pole, and you walked around and you did calibrations that took a long time. And you know, you can use AI now very simply to say, well, this is a football pitch. I understand this is a football pitch, these are the dimensions of the pitch, I can calibrate my system based on it. So it's a good example of the use of AI to sort of start to automate things and make people's lives easier ultimately. We still need humans operating things, but how can we make their lives easier for things like more menial tasks like calibration?
And what about generative AI? How is that changing the way broadcasters produce and deliver live football coverage?
Extra Motion is a good example of that, where we generate frames of video using AI. So we take the 2 frames of video at shot of 50 frames per second, and we turn it into 150 frames a second. And that is more on the creativity side. I think with AI, you've got this idea of automation and sort of, you know, perhaps even reduction of humans, automating tasks, that kind of thing. The opposite is the creativity, and we feel that Gen AI really helps with the creativity. And again, we've got operators with their fingers on the tools, you know, they're pressing the buttons, they're seeing the content. If we can put tools at their fingertips that they wouldn't normally have, using Gen AI, that's been our sort of one of our MOs. So Extra Motion brings the super slow motion, turning 50 frames to 150 frames. It does shallow depth of field, so sort of, you know, bokeh effect, blurring the backgrounds, which, you know, in a football environment, someone scores a goal, actually what you want to do sometimes is defocus the crowd and focus on the emotion of their face. So that's a really nice thing. And traditionally you'd need really expensive cameras to do that. You'd need very expensive lenses. You would have maybe 1 or 2 of those in the stadium. Now you can turn any camera into shallow depth of field. You can turn any camera into super slow motion. And the other one that we've been doing is the opposite, sharpening as well, to see, did the ball cross the line, was the foot in or the foot out, all that kind of stuff. So just to bring that kind of, those things that traditionally would have been maybe done by dedicated hardware, be it a camera or a processor or something, we can do in software. We can do it within 2 or 3 seconds, and we can put it at an operator's fingertips, so they have the choice of whether to use that technology or not.
Okay. And you mentioned the transition to IP-based workflows. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities for broadcasters making this transition?
I think at the moment it's things like scalability and burstability. You know, when in the old-fashioned domain, in the SDI domain, which is old-fashioned but still current for a lot of people, I have to say, you were generally very fixed. You know, your routers had a fixed number of inputs and outputs. Your servers were the same, your vision mixers were the same, everything was a very fixed ecosystem. And I think with software and the transition to IP in general, you have much more headroom in terms of burstability, in terms of enabling things like remote production, the ability to extend the production from the broadcast center to the venue, or from the venue to the truck, or between this multi-site production becomes much more feasible with the transition to IP and the transition to software. But also the ability to spin something up in the cloud for the duration that you need it. You need it for 10 minutes or 10 hours, you spin it up for 10 hours. So in theory it's cost saving as well. The cloud is expensive. Let's not beat around the bush. It is an expensive thing, but it should enable you to have only use things when you need them, as opposed to that big capex investment. So I think the other thing that the transition to IP does is probably switch the investment from more capex, big investments, to more opex, kind of ad hoc, when I need it, on demand style, on demand activation of products and services.
Okay. And sustainability is becoming a priority for broadcasters. How is EVS contributing to more energy efficient and eco-friendly football productions?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that the sustainability topic is a big one for EVS. It's something we're very proud of. I think it's a big one for our industry at the moment as well. We see it more and more with people like SVG putting round tables together. From our point of view, our carbon footprint is dictated by our customers' use of our products. So the only way we can reduce our carbon footprint as EVS is to reduce our customers' carbon footprint. So it's things like the basics of looking at power consumption, I think, is important. We need to look at the power consumption of products, and dedicated hardware products use less power than software. That's mathematically provable. We have the maths that shows that our Neuron product uses about 25% of the power of a off-the-shelf CPU GPU equivalent. So there are good reasons to stick with dedicated hardware. It has longer lifespans. It runs for 10, 12 years as opposed to 4 or 5 years. So there's some good reasons there. I think also we need to look at how long things are turned on and off for. It's a big thing in our industry to turn things on and never turn them off again, just in case. And I think we need to get more into that mindset of we need to start and stop things, we need to turn them on, we need to turn them off. So we've been doing a lot of work with power management, and actually something that we did for ourselves in the company was start to look at, okay, how do we manage our own power, our own costs, by turning things off and enabling them to be turned on. So we've been looking at power management a lot more. Those kind of things really contribute to the I would say the E part of ESG, but there's also the S and the G. There's a big part of governance that is cybersecurity. So making sure that our customers' content is very valuable. We can't be the weak point in the chain there, so we have to put the focus on cybersecurity, and also. Then there's things like just on the social aspect, making sure that we're a good company to work for, making sure that we're things like a top employer. I'm a big believer that if you put the people first, the product will follow, and then the process. So it's really about making sure that we put people first, both within our own company, but also at the broadcasters, the people who use our products, making sure they have a good experience of using our products and they get a good feeling from using them, that they're accessible and things like that. So I like to look at the whole ESG spectrum rather than, I think we talk maybe a bit too much about sustainability, meaning power consumption. And I don't think that's true. I think we have to look at the bigger picture, actually.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much.